Hey there, Knicks fans. How you doing? It's your boy, Jonathan Macri, with you for a very special edition of the Knicks Film School Podcast. The busiest man in show business is kind enough to join us around this time every year. I was thinking about how to introduce him because I feel like I've used up all my good material. So I was thinking of Animal Farm, in which all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. Well, all New York Knicks beat writers are equal, but one lone beat writer is more equal than the rest. And we have him on today, Ian Begley. Hello, sir.
Very kind of you, my friend. I appreciate that and the originality, because that's special. And thank you.
You gotta keep it fresh here at Knicks Film School, because otherwise, what are we doing? How are you? Let's start there. How you doing? How's the season been?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm good. This is a busy time of year, as always. I do want to say, though, that your product all around, man, it's been excellent. So I appreciate the efforts from you and everybody. And I have not signed up yet, but I'm going to do the Brunson tier, I think it is, for the X's and O's with Benji and DJ. So great stuff. Thank you for putting it together.
I think we may. I got to check with our producer. I think we may have it in the budget to get a complimentary subscription out to, one or two special individuals, of which you certainly qualify. All right. You're a busy man. So let's get right to it, because there's a lot of stuff to talk about. Before we get into the transaction stuff and, give our favorite aggregators stuff to compile responsibly, of course, always responsibly. How are the vibes right now around the team? Because they went through a rough patch, and it seemed like it was, interesting stuff, give or take a Josh Hart post-game quote here or there. They won 5 in a row. It would seem that they have every reason to be happy. Are they happy? Are things good?
Yeah. I mean, everything that I've heard, what's been said publicly and kind of behind the scenes, yes, people are happy. Winning kind of covers up everything, right? It cures all ails. And that's, I think, what's happened here. When you look at, not to beat a dead horse on the Josh thing, but, he says that we made a big deal out of it. And I think he didn't mean much by it, but that's not how it was taken by some people internally. Internally, it was seen as a criticism specific to some situations. So that stuff, though, it seems to have been washed by the wayside, given how they've played lately. Look, the way they're doing what they're doing on both sides of the ball, the way the ball is moving, I don't think anybody would complain about anything that's happened over these last few games here. So, yeah, I think I don't want to say put that stuff to bed, because it's a long season, ups and downs, all that. But certainly right now, the vibes, as Jalen Brunson would say, are immaculate.
That's great to hear. I have to ask, because you brought it up. Does having a guy like Josh who will just say things sometimes, does that make your job easier or harder? Because it feels like he says a lot. And if you want to read into, it's very easy to make a big deal out of it, because I heard it and I was like, no, this isn't a media. I don't care what Josh is saying now. This isn't a media thing. You came out and said it twice. So how do you handle this with him?
I love Josh Hart. From a media perspective, he's been fantastic with us. So yeah, I guess just personally, I would much prefer someone who talks and someone who shares their insights relatively unvarnished and isn't worried about what happens in the aftermath of sharing those insights, than guys who are less apt to do that and kind of share cliches and don't give you much insight. So, whatever work comes along with that, whatever kind of, calls you have to make around that, I love it. It's fantastic. And I appreciate his insight, and he's always available too. So yeah, just fantastic from my seat.
That's cool. Yeah, no, I mean, I like it too, because you feel like, as a fan, at least you're getting a little bit more than, like you said, it's as opposed to cliches. And like you said, hopefully, whatever he was talking about, is there one more on this? Is there So the impression I got is that he was referring to someone in particular, even though he has since come out and very flatly denied that he was talking about one person in particular. Is that the sort of thing that, in your experience covering the NBA as intimately as you have, is that the sort of thing that can linger over the course of weeks and months?
Yeah, I think so. I think the tough part is addressing things head on, and not even in a confrontational way, but, problem solving, getting ahead of things that, Josh might have been referring to, and getting ahead of them behind closed doors. I think that in a perfect world, that's what happens. But, when things look, if Josh were to come out and say, I'm just going to use a name, Pacome Dadier, he's got a selfish agenda when he's on the floor, and he uses a name, that's a different story in terms of any lingering resentment. But he didn't use a name, he didn't specify. And so I think that, sure, it's maybe something that if I'm a guy who I think Josh is referring to me, it's going to upset me. But I think that, where they are now, just beating these West Coast teams the way they have, I doubt anyone's thinking too deeply about those heart quotes at this point. Including
potentially the person who he may have been talking about? Or is that, you think that's...
Yeah. No, including those people, that person, whoever it might be. Yes, I would assume just like it's not water under the bridge again, because, things change, ups and downs, long season. But right now, I can't see it as some lingering issue.
That's good to hear. Okay, let's move on. There's a name that you've brought up a couple of times, Jonas Valančiūnas. I always hate to mischaracterize your reporting. So, just how would you say the Knicks have kicked the tires, or have thought about him, have talked about him? Is that fair to say?
I would say that if they know that Mitchell Robinson cannot be their backup five as much as they need him to be coming up to the trade deadline, they would have interest in Valančiūnas. I could say that for sure. So, yeah, on their radar, certainly as you approach February 6th because of the situation with Robinson. And I do think that's the case, because they had interest in him in the offseason as well. I don't know if this matters as much, but I think Leon Rose represented Jonas for a while earlier in his career. So, yeah, he is on their radar.
I don't know what you could be. The agency relationships are not something that has really come up in this franchise over the last few years. So I want to pick that apart, because I think it's the most interesting thing as we approach this trade deadline. So first, the Mitch part, where Thibs gave us a little bit yesterday. I think he said controlled contact in addition to running and jumping. Do you have any read on, because we know this organization has not over the last few years been as forthcoming as they can be when it comes to injuries. Do you think they have a good read on where Mitch is and where they think Mitch will be over the course of this year?
I had heard that there was, a level of optimism about him being back early, mid-February, somewhere in there. But it doesn't sound like that's going to happen, though, based on where we are now.
Okay.
So I do think because of that, they have an idea of what it might look like and kind of where he is. But it's they've obviously been very vague, haven't given you anything publicly. And then I just wonder if we're headed to the OG route here, where they get past the deadline and then we get an update on a timetable, or, I would think it would be some kind of timetable, because there's no advantage to them telling anyone when Mitch is going to be back or not going to be back ahead of the deadline. It doesn't help them at all. So I could kind of understand from their perspective why they're not giving specific updates on him as we lead up to next Thursday.
Okay, let's go to the Precious piece of this. Precious Achiuwa has played better recently, I think. I think he's been really good over the last week or two. Has some obvious limitations size-wise and I think he's done some nice things offensively, but not a player like Valančiūnas. So you could just, I don't know how much they would want to do this, but you could dump the ball down to him and say, here, go get us a bucket if we need it. Do you think that there is uniform organizational thought in terms of like, we like Precious, we think he's a valuable depth piece, maybe the backup four, this and that, but like we are not comfortable going into the postseason with him as our backup five? Or do you think that there is maybe some different sorts of opinions out there on that?
I don't know about the backup five piece. I do know that, there's people with differing opinions generally on Precious.
Okay.
And look, he has played well lately. There's no doubt. The interesting thing to me is if you do have to make a trade, right? Mitchell Robinson, because he's hurt, because nobody really knows the details of his health except for the Knicks, and maybe they share that with other teams. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But people that I've talked to seem to be in the dark about it. And so why would you trade for Mitchell Robinson right now? Like, you don't know his health status. So you would be dealing him at such a low point in terms of value. And then you look at, all right, well, what else is there? What else do we have? Precious Achiuwa is a guy who, he's in your rotation. He's got a salary that could help you get somewhere to salary matching. He does not have that no trade clause that he might have had if he hadn't waived it during those negotiations. So, that's kind of with Precious. I don't know the answer to the backup five question. Okay. That's a great question, but I do think just in terms of the conversations that they would have around trades, he's got to be in there in some way, shape, or form, just because of the nature of the roster and what he makes and all that.
Yeah. Before we get to Valančiūnas, because you bring up, so there's the Mitch value thing, and this organization under Leon Rose has not, unless I'm forgetting something, has not traded a guy when they are at a clear either nadir or close to a nadir in terms of their value, and there was like a realistic expectation that value could rebound. So there's that piece of it, but at the same time, or rather, going with that, the Achiuwa contract is expiring. And again, typically they like to do their business before maybe getting to that free agency point, like control what you could control. Do you think the Mitch value thing is impacting them here in terms of like where he's basically just going to be outgoing salary and that they're maybe uncomfortable with that?
I have to think that, look, if you're in the front office there and you're doing your analysis of any kind of deal and you see a player that, you've signed to the contract you signed him to, you've seen the production that he has when he's healthy, sure, and you're not going to want to give him up, I don't think, for pennies on the dollar, because you're trying to maximize every asset. I think that would be the case uniformly with any good front office. And I assume that's the case here too. I'm sure there's some degree of hesitancy to do anything with Mitch because of what you would get back, which is, again, not much. So I do think that factors in.
Okay. And then just the Valančiūnas piece of it. Again, I find this so fascinating because he's a guy, he's been around the league a long time. He has some very clear strengths. Again, we saw it even when Washington played the Knicks. He was going off for a little bit, getting some buckets. He is a beast on the boards. He could set a mean screen. And yet you would not characterize him as a typical Thibs five. Then again, neither, would you characterize Karl-Antony Towns maybe as that? But Towns brings obviously so much more, and Valančiūnas is obviously a little bit more limited. Do you have any sense on, is this more just like, again, we're like, if we have doubts about Mitch, we have to get another five in here, and this is like the best option? Or is it more they look at Valančiūnas as, you know what, there's some things there that we like, we could work with what he brings, and maybe we could try to cover up his weaknesses?
Yeah, I don't want to misstate or say something that I don't know. So I don't know the answer to that specifically, but I would just go back to the summer, right? And he was certainly on their radar, and he was somebody that, they were hopeful to go out and get. And so just based on that, I mean, that was before the Towns trade, obviously. So things probably changed to a degree, but just based on that blanket interest, I would assume that there's still, the thought that, hey, this guy can help us in terms of how they would cover up his weaknesses and the actual X's and O's. I'm not sure, but I did just a general degree of interest that I know is there.
One more question, which I feel bad, but I feel compelled to ask it. They do have that Washington pick. I know a lot of fans have asked me really over the last couple of years, or whenever they got that pick, wouldn't Washington want that pick back in any transaction? And this is going back to other potential trade targets. Have you heard anything in regards to whether Washington cares about that pick, whether the Knicks want to keep that pick out of any, and again, it's kind of like a fake pick. It'll probably wind up being 2 seconds, but any read on where that pick might play in terms of a Valančiūnas trade?
I probably could have asked. I haven't asked anybody, so I don't know.
Okay, but that's fine.
It's early morning. It was late night last night.
It's the pick that is protected this year and next year. Right. And if it does not convey next year, it converts into what should be, would be at least one very good second, because the conveyance kicks over immediately. It would be a 26 second, which if it's protected, obviously would be very good. And then a 27 second. So it's a nice asset, even if it doesn't convey as a first. But again, I'm more curious what Washington maybe would do. They want, again, what would probably be those 2 seconds back? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure they would ask for significant draft compensation on Valančiūnas, and whether it's that or even, and I'm not suggesting anything other than what I'm going to say. You could say, if you're the Knicks, hey, we don't have a good first to give you, but we have a first round draft pick in Bacome Dadier, who it's essentially giving you a first round pick of a player who has very good upside. So I think, if you're talking about draft compensation, it's not beyond the realm to suggest that, hey, Dadier could be viewed as a first round pick by some teams if you're trying to sweeten a deal.
So I wasn't going to bring this up, but you just open these doors, Ian, and I just have to walk through them. So let's assume, for the purposes of just our conversation, that it would be Achiuwa as the primary salary, the base of the salary going out. Valančiūnas makes 9.9, Precious makes 6. The Knicks have to send out more than they take back. Thibs gets you to over 8, but you still have a gap to make up. I'm going to go by Spotrac, and I'm pretty sure, based on the contract they signed him to, Landry Shamet is not even tradable before the deadline, so he's out, which means to get the rest of that salary, it's going to be either a rotation player. I mean, I guess it would be Campaign to fill in that remaining gap, or one of the rookies. Do you have a read on whether they would be more comfortable sending out one of the rookies versus sending out a guy like Payne, who, as of now, is coming in and playing, valuable minutes for you?
I would just, the only thing I could say there is, logically, right? If you're trading for a backup 5 and you're trading Achiuwa, by trading Campaign, you're creating another vacancy. Yeah. So I would assume, you're more apt to give up somebody who you're not depending on in the here and now to fix that hole. Because then how do you supplant Campaign's minutes? And I'm sure it's doable in some way, shape, or form, but it's not ideal. So just an assumption there. They'd be more apt to go ahead and deal a rookie than somebody who they need right now. And I think too, though, that it's yes, it is championship or bust, but the idea that it's championship or bust this year and that's it. I don't know if everybody over there is thinking that way, because you have these guys under contract for multiple years. So I only say that to say they don't have to do a deal that, a panic deal, I should say, a deal where they wouldn't do it under normal circumstances. I don't think, at least in my conversation, I don't think they feel forced into a move like that just because they're this team that has gone all in on winning a title. It's not as if it's this year or, the world ends. It's a multi-year thing.
You led me exactly where I wanted to go to finish up, because one of our frequent conversation points that you've been on over the years is organizational pressures and how much those play into their decision-making process and all the things of that nature. As you said, yes, they're all in. Yes, they want to win a championship. We don't need to talk about that. Obviously, they want to win a championship this year. They think they can. But with the understanding that the Bridges and particularly the Cat trade hamstrung them in some very real ways in terms of their ability to make maneuvers, and that some of those handcuffs will be unlocked this summer, do you think that there is an organizational uniformity, or mostly uniformity? There's always going to be people who think different things, but like for the most part, it's like we've given ourselves a nice shot this year. We're going to try our best, but we know that like this is not the final like stop. We've given ourselves a runway, and we're going to have more options to do some things this summer.
I mean, I think that thought is there. I don't know what the prevailing thought is. I mean, Leon Rose isn't taking a poll of everyone and then texting me the poll results, but I do think that thought's there.
I'm shocked to hear that.
That thought is there. And what look is that like hard and fast? I don't know, but I know the thought is there, and to me, these guys are under contract for several years, so why make a move that really hurts you, or a deal that you clearly lose from an asset value perspective, just to make a run at a time where you could, again, like you're saying, hold on to your chips and do something differently in the offseason.
Yeah, and I think like I'm not as much this way as I used to be, but even me, who's not like I don't fall in love with rookies anymore, but like I would sitting here like to tell myself that there's like some real organizational investment in the three kids they just drafted, and are maybe more Dottier than anybody else because he's young and he's kind of this interesting lump of clay. Like, do you think they like the rookies that they took? Are they still pretty high on them? Like, what's your read there?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything that you've heard has been positive. Yeah. And then, I mean, they're not going to say anything negative publicly. So I do take that stuff with a grain of salt, but just the way they've approached it and what they were saying in the aftermath of the draft, I think they got guys that they like a lot. And look, again, multi-year thing here. So, you're going to have to have some young talent that comes up and is ready to replace a rotation player at some point. So, yeah, I think there is a high value placed on all three of those guys. But as we said earlier, like if you're going to make a trade where you need to sweeten the deal, then maybe you have to make a decision on one of these three guys because you don't want to move another rotation guy.
Okay. A couple more things before we get you out of here. Karl-Antony Towns, I think, there was some degree of curiosity about how his adjustment to playing in, the bright lights of New York City would go. What's your read on how it's been so far for him? I mean, obviously the thumb is a thing right now, and he's the first to admit that. But how do you think it's going with Karl?
I mean, just really well. I mean, I'll be honest. After the first preseason game, he said something to the effect of, "There's pressure playing in New York, or the bright lights in New York." And I heard that, and I was like, "It's the first preseason game, and we're already there." So my antenna was up. But no, he seems super comfortable, happy, high self-confidence, unbothered by the kind of daily ups and downs that come here and just in any NBA season, but they get magnified here. Yeah, he seems happy in that clubhouse. He's joking around, jovial, just seems really comfortable. Give him credit because he slid right in here and been very clear from day one that this is Jalen Brunson's team, and he's accepted gladly to come in and slide underneath Jalen in that sense. And I think it's worked out really well, in part because of that willingness.
Every NBA locker room, I feel like, has its own personality. Do you think this was a good match in terms of how the Knicks locker room's personality is, which is kind of dominated by Josh and Jalen, and Karl, like he's jovial? You think it was a good match?
You know what's funny? I've been around enough to know that I don't know enough to truly characterize a locker room. Because, we see what we see. Sure. After games, we're in there. Before games, you're in there for a little bit. And I think some guys, just for obvious reasons, their true colors are not showing when we're in there. So I always hesitate to do that, but I could just say, based on what we see, he's in there. He's joking around with everybody. He and Jalen watched the Eagles game together. And, you know, Josh, he's joking around about. So just the way that he is when we're in there, it seems like he fits right in and he's happy. And that makes a difference.
Very cool. Of course, me being captain of the minutes police, I have to ask a question about Thibs. It seems like there's been some level of adjustment in his rotations recently. Was taking McCall out earlier, although he left him in for longer last night, but that may have been a matchup thing. Landry getting first quarter minutes. Is what I'm always curious about is, like, do you have any sense of like what if any communication exists within the organization, specifically between Thibs or the coaching staff and the front office? Like, do they like hold meetings about the minutes? Is it brought up in meetings? Like, are they, you know, is there somebody on his ass about this stuff? Like, do you have any read on how, or anything of that nature?
My general sense is it's Thibs's call. And I think that's kind of the approach that has been taken and is taken, but that's not to say like they're conduits between the front office and Thibs, or, you know, direct communication with Thibs. I don't think anybody will specifically tell Thibs what he can and can't do, which makes sense. I mean, look at the results. But I do think, you know, there are people who suggest stuff. And I don't know if this recent 9-man rotation, which it wasn't a traditional 9-man rotation last night, but past few games it had been, I don't know if that's a result of somebody talking to Thibs, but whatever happened, it was Thibs' decision to make. I don't think anybody's forcing him to do something he doesn't want to do.
Okay, it's everybody's favorite moment. Put Ian on the spot and give the aggregator something. Your sense, we're a week. What are we? Yeah, we're a week out. Week and a couple hours out. Do you think they make a move? And if you care to, if your answer is yes, if you care to characterize, if you had to assume, what maybe sort of thing we might be looking at? Yeah,
I'm gonna bore you, and I'm sorry for that. The answer is yes, but the yes is because I do think they move Jericho Sims somewhere, and whatever you get back, get a second round pick, whatever it may be, I do think that's a move that would happen, is likely, highly likely to happen. And then the other one is just hard to gauge, right? With Mitchell Robinson. I mean, look, the idea that he has not been cleared for practice, cleared for contact yet, and the deadline is as close as it is, I would assume that they'll continue to talk to people about big men. My understanding and talking to other teams is they've been in touch on that. And I assume that's just kind of due diligence at this point, knowing what they know leading up to the deadline. But guessing or making a prediction on that one is so tough. I would assume, given the trade value, that you probably don't trade Mitch. And then figuring something else out is difficult for the reasons we discussed. Yeah. So that's the best I could give you right now, man. I'm sorry. I definitely Jericho. And just, it's hard to get a read on the other one.
Am I wrong to find the Jericho thing curious? I mean, I don't think Jericho's like the second coming, but it's that, like, is it just like we've kind of moved past him as being a part of this potential like solution moving forward, so we're just going to try to get something for him? Is it as simple as that, or am I missing something here?
I mean, I think that's it. That's the headline, you would say, and so maybe there's other stuff there. But I do think that's the top line. I mean, he's going to be free agent, correct?
Yeah, unrestricted. I believe it's unrestricted because his contract ends this summer, and I think by the nature, actually, I shouldn't say that. I'm not sure if it's going to be restricted or unrestricted, but he's going to be a free agent.
Yeah, and so look, they've got Huck Porty, and they like Huck Porty, and so maybe it could be as simple as that. Just like, it's not going to happen this summer. There's not going to be a reunion. So let's figure something out now. So you can get to a place where maybe you're playing more and you can put stuff on tape for teams who might want to sign you in the summer. Now, he's had plenty of opportunity to play here, in my opinion, particularly this season. So it's not like he hasn't gotten regular minutes he has. So, but I just think it's probably as simple as what you stated initially. It's time, Huck 40 and all that. And so it's going to be interesting to see what they get back. And I'd be surprised if it didn't happen, given the way the winds are blowing. But yeah, let's see.
That's great. I can sit here and pick your brain on a whole bunch of other NBA trade stuff because you are plugged in everywhere. And you, as always, my one thing I will always say, Ian knows way more than he says, and that's what makes you the best. Thank you so much. Your time is so valuable always, but especially this time of year. Anything plug or promote before I get you out here?
I'm going to plug your appearance on our show. John is gracious enough to come on the Putback. He'll be on February 5th. The other guest is likely to be Mr. Mark Berman. It's not set in stone, but we definitely have John, and that's going to be great. We're going to have a lot of fun day before the deadline, so be sure to check us out there. And John, thanks, man. I always love coming on. Always love shooting the breeze about the Knicks and everything else. And it's always ask me anything. That's always my approach coming on here. So anything you want to ask, I'm here for you.
That's what makes you, well, there's a lot of reasons why you're the best. As an aside, I want to mail Berman, maybe a little umbrella. You know what we should actually, it's the head umbrella where he wears the little umbrella on his head so he could do the interview from outside again, because that was such a special moment.
That was fun.
That was a lot of fun.
Going the extra mile, Mark. I appreciate you, Berm.
Mark goes if there's a mile to be gone, Mark will go it because he's the best. Everybody, you heard it here. Tune in to me and Ian and hopefully Mark next Wednesday on the Putback. I believe that's at 1 p.m. Who knows? Maybe we'll be reacting to something happening or a rumor or whatever. I'm sure it'll be fun regardless. Ian Begley, thank you so much. Everybody listening obviously knows where to find you, but go follow Ian on all the social platforms and check out everything that he puts out on SNY, because there's always, it's nothing but the best, and it's no fluff, no filler, nothing you don't need. And it's the best way to stay informed as a Knicks fan. So thank you, my friend. Appreciate it.
I appreciate the kind words, man. Really do. And it was great to be with you.